Good morning.
How you doing?
Hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to stay off camera. I have internet instability. So I'd rather hear everybody and not fall off.
I'll leave it to the host, but that's fine with me.
Thank you.
Seems like a good time for people to begin introducing themselves. Josh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Tolkien. I'm the director of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. I use he, him pronouns. I am zooming in from the Long Branch neighborhood of Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C. And I'm happy to be here today.
I'll go. I'm Lula Bryce. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Smart Elections, and we're a national advocacy group focused on security and inclusion in elections.
Other folks who would like to introduce themselves may.
Hi, I'm MK Hicks. I am in California and I am very curious today. And I love the reference to Silver Springs because my daughter's out there with NOAA. And love
Wonderful.
that. Yeah, she's an ocean acidification expert and is looking to save the world and the planet through her profession and the oceans especially.
It's incredibly important.
Yeah, I've heard it might be.
I'm Bridget. I'm friends with MK, and I am the founder of a nonprofit called We Save the World. And we're relatively new, trying to get our mission really going now that we exist. And our mission is to inspire young people to be eco-heroes and to do fundraising for nonprofits that are saving the environment.
Hi, I'm Roy Reynolds. I'm out in Suffolk County, and I've been going around with a lot of the local officials here over voting machines and other issues. I've worked with Lulu a little bit, and I guess I can learn something because we've done pretty well, but we could use a little more help probably on this. So maybe I'll pick up something today that will help us achieve our goals, right, with the local officials. I'm having a bad hair day too.
Hi, I'm Sue. I'm from Suffolk and a friend of Roy Reynolds, and I'm here today because Lulu recommended it.
I just found out that Nina, our the actress, singer-songwriter who put the word out on her Instagram, had a personal emergency, so we'll be meeting her on a different occasion. Okay. Josh, you're on.
Okay. So Eric invited me here today to talk a little bit about tools for communication and persuasion. Let me first just tell you a little bit about myself. I have been the director of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club for 13 years. We have about 15,000 members in the state and about 50,000 online activists. And our job as the Maryland chapter is to advance the Sierra Club's mission in the entire state of Maryland. And that mission broadly is to enjoy, explore, and protect the planet. We get people outdoors, we introduce them to the joy and wonder of nature, and we inspire them to take action at the local level, at the state level, through their personal action to take part in protecting the planet. The most significant part of that work is our electoral and our legislative work. We make endorsements of environmentally minded candidates, and then we push them to adopt environmental policies at the city, the county, and the state level. I've started to use the term lobbyist because it helps explain part of what I do, but I will share that I never intended to be a lobbyist. When I first started this job, I traveled to the state capitol in Annapolis to pressure public officials, and I would bring people, Sierra Club volunteer leaders from different communities to Annapolis to connect them with their legislators and their decision makers. And over time, I organized enough meetings that I got to know the legislators and would call them and talk with them. And I discovered that I have a disposition for lobbying. It's not a term I love, it's not a term most of us love, but it's an incredibly important part of working within the current system. And through all of that work, I have learned a pretty significant fundamental truth that legislators, elected officials, are people. They are beautifully, horribly imperfect, everyday people. And when we remember that they are people and treat them as people with all of those imperfections, considering the moods that they're in, the different modes by which they learn, what motivates them, what their information systems are, whether they're motivated more by a rational argument or a moral argument. When we really understand them as people, we can apply the same principles of organizing that we do to organizing, fundamentally starting with the idea of starting where they're at, not where you're at. I conduct a lobby training for the Sierra Club's annual legislative lobby night. We draw between 250 to 400 people each year to engage with legislators in Maryland. We organize 100 meetings. We also work in 9 different counties in Maryland. I'd say that Eric inviting me on hopefully is enough of my credibility, but just to share a little bit, under my leadership, Maryland was the first state to ban fracking, hydraulic fracturing. We have one of the strongest climate goals in the country. We now have very, very strong relationships with the governor of Maryland, with key legislators, and every year the Sierra Club leadership, mostly volunteer leadership, draft and work with legislators to introduce bills, lobby in a coordinated way. And I, as one of the 6 staff people in Maryland, largely empower and support our volunteers to be the lead guard of our environmental advocacy in the state. And I think today I'm excited to take questions or respond to prompts from Eric or others and share a little bit more about how we apply this this principle of communicating with decision makers and finding the ways to persuade them. So I think, Eric, I'm just gonna stop there and excited to continue the conversation.
So Lulu, why don't you raise some challenges and think with Josh about challenging situations dealing with policymakers. Lulu has a lot of experience in this area also.
I appreciate that, Eric. So I'm gonna be like really honest, I think, and as transparent as possible to try to get the most out of this. So I think I have kind of like two channels of questions. One is a channel in terms of strategy. So one of the things I was chatting with someone whose name I don't want to mention, but who is extremely influential in California politics and has done like similar to you, I think, Josh, it's very effective advocacy there in past referendums and gotten policy changes. And so he said something to me that I thought was pretty interesting, and I'm not quite sure how I would act on it, but it was clear. He said, in California, one of the main things is paying more attention to Democratic Party supporters. And by that, I think he means funders, than most good governments. That he said to pay attention to those Democratic Party funders more than most good governments groups do. He said most legislators feel they can blow up good government groups, but if they have a group of party delegates who they likely know personally talking to them and who will be voting on whether to endorse them or another Democrat or contested primaries in the future, then they have to listen. So he was really talking about kind of like influencing the influencers, I think, rather than influencing the legislators directly. So that's sort of like one bucket of questions that I have. And I think the other bucket of questions I have has to do more with my own personality. And I think the kind of feedback that I've gotten repeatedly, which is just that I'm too persistent, or I try too hard, or I'm sort of a word that was used on me was that I was hectoring people. I didn't even know what that word meant. I had to look it up. It was like, you know, I think sort of. So I think that kind of like fine line between, you know, being persistent but not being too annoying. I think that's something that I would love guidance on. So those are sort of two things that I would put forward. And you can take me off spotlight, Eric. I think the spotlight could be on Josh.
God, those are great questions. So dealing with the first question, I want to share a caveat first. I came to the Sierra Club and I come to this work believing that we need to build political power, people power to take on the moneyed interests that continue to dominate politics. And that's just intrinsic to a lot of the challenges. Campaign finance or no campaign finance, businesses can afford to be in Annapolis, to have lobbyists, to have a presence there. And I believe that we need to show that strong political power in order to persuade people who maybe aren't 100% with us, or to persuade them to take the time to care. And sometimes when I get into more nuanced strategy, because that is what I do professionally, I might make a recommendation to someone that would seem to be dampering or hindering movement building. So I just want to share that I'm very, very careful to not give advice or encourage people to ever try to hinder broad power building. But I do encourage people to be thoughtful about how they express those sentiments. So with that said, strategically, I absolutely recommend that you think about where the legislator that you're trying to influence, who they see as their power base. It's not the same state to state, but I would assume that in almost every state, Democratic Party players are incredibly important for Democratic elected officials. So last night I was at a big Maryland State Democratic Party fundraiser to raise money for the contested Senate race. I'm sort of careful to not drop too much money or show up too much to Democratic Party events, lest I be viewed as partisan. But I do attend and donate to the fundraisers for key elected officials. And I try to understand and will look at who the large donors are to most of our targets. In my experience, there's not a huge number of very large donors, and you can usually meet them by going to a fundraiser or two for the particular target. You can see big organizations in Maryland, unions are large donors. Understanding which unions are most active in their district, or going back to the campaign website to find out who endorsed or didn't endorse them, but also looking at who maxes out. In Maryland, the campaign donation limit, I think, is at $5,500. Take a look at the name. Also search separately for the same address, but with no name, because if you encounter a household where they've donated and their spouse has donated and their nephew has donated, then you have a house that has a lot of influence. Sometimes those people are accessible to us. And if I'm feeling particularly sleuthy, I cross-check the donors of a particular elected official with my own membership database, or I'll share the names around with our coalition partners to ask, does anybody know this person? Does anybody know that person? And I think it's good to try to figure out somebody's social network. But I would spend just as much time looking at their biography and asking the following questions. Are they a member of a certain faith community? And if so, what congregation do they go to? Who's the minister? Is that minister or priest or rabbi or imam part of any type of network? Maybe they're part of a sort of broad-based faith organizing network. Maybe they're part of a social justice ministry, and you might have an interesting access point through that particular place of faith. Did they come up through local politics? They have municipal relationships. Were they on the city council with somebody else? Do they have kids? And if so, what school their kids go to? To me, the reason all of this is important is I think that we greatly discount the importance of the messenger. There are people in my life who I trust so much. I trust them to tell me what they think. I trust them to supply me with the counter arguments, so I know what they weighed when they made a decision. And when I'm so busy that I don't have time to understand an issue, I defer to the people that I trust more than I take time to actually learn that issue myself. And I think that the important thing that I try to remember is the vast majority of elected officials in Maryland are, the Maryland elected General Assembly is only 3 months a year. I think New York is one of the 4 year-round legislatures, so it might be a little, no? Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess they're officially in office all year, but they're only in the legislature from January to June.
Okay, so it's still limited, but they are full-time funded. In Maryland, everyone has other jobs.
I see. I think they just stopped that a few years ago. They upped their salary and told them they can't have other jobs, basically. Really
interesting side conversation on the utility of that, because there's very, very interesting arguments on both sides of that in terms of what that does to people being accessible, legislators being accessible to people. So I do think that it's important to try to understand who a legislator trusts. But I guess I have found that in a lot of cases, it is, I have less utility if I have existing relationships with their influencers and I have an inroad there, there's a lot. If I don't, it's a lot more difficult, at least for me, to try to create a relationship with a person who happens to be influencing an elected official, because I have no excuse to be contacting them except that I have a strategic need and want to influence them. So my experience, at least, is that I have typically tapped out that part of the network, and therefore, even though it might be more effective, I can sort of exhaust it fairly quickly. And then the question is, My ultimate goal is in creating the tools for the largest number of my volunteer leaders to develop healthy and ongoing relationships with the elected officials. And I tell them fundamentally, try to think about it like a Thanksgiving dinner. Because that person, whether even if the meeting that you're in is quiet with them, their brain, their day is like a dinner table with people yelling across in all directions and pieces of information coming at all times. And we all know that when we do that, what you try to do is you try to figure out what conversation you're going to enjoy, which one actually works. And it's undemocratic and frustrating, but it's important to remember that these people have no obligation to talk with you. Now, we have a recourse of trying to unelect people who are dismissive of their own constituents, but they're not obligated to take meetings. So figure out a way to make the meeting enjoyable and fun. The first thing that we do when we go into a lobby visit is that we share our community context. Where do you live? Where you're from? Do you have kids? What school do they go to? Are you part of the YMCA? You're part of a church. Like, share a little bit about yourself and ground yourself in the community. Half the time, there'll be a connection instantly. The legislators are so active that they will know the church, know the pastor, know the place. They'll ask a question, and then instantly you're not just a person coming in to pester them, but you're somebody with some emotional connection to them. And that makes a really big difference. You have something to build on. You can reference a past example. You can build common ground. I mean, the least effective thing we can do is speak as if we're communicating a 2-page graduate level policy memo. Like, a few legislators think that way, but most of them think in different ways. One great example of this is if we drew up a list of all the legislators and what their positions are on having Maryland adopt a bottle deposit program. And the single biggest factor is whether they lived in a state previously that had a bottle deposit program. Those people who did thought bottle deposit programs were great. Those people who haven't had all sorts of questions about bottle deposit programs. The people who lived in a state that had a bottle deposit program had questions too. It's just that those questions were not sufficient to make them not support the policy. So it was people's experience, not just the rational argument, that shaped how they felt about the issue. I think the other question you asked was around persistence. I don't have any great advice there. I have seen people who are persistent and incredibly effective. Can't tell you how many times I've heard legislators stand up in front of a room and say, and tonight I want to toast to Lulu. She is persistent. Wow, is she persistent? But she got me on this issue, and I want to thank her. Keep up the persistence. That's what you need to do. Now, I think reading the room, though, and if you get to the point where the person is actively avoiding you, then I would say that's probably when you've crossed a threshold. But I encourage the people that we're working with to be persistent and to be direct. We practice a little bit a very, very uncomfortable question that we ask when we're lobbying, which is, can I count on your support? Because legislators will always give these sort of vague type answers. And that's one of the questions that we practice because it's sort of uncomfortable, like asking for a raise or something. It's something you have to practice saying in order to bluntly say to them, can I count on your support? Because they want to keep their options open. And so we do work on a couple of those tricks of the trade, but those are all like little lobby tricks. I think the biggest advice that I have is to take the time to try to figure out who the person is, how they tick, and what types of arguments they respond to. Some people are biased towards who's talking with them. Some people respond most to people of a certain race or their race, or a certain gender or their gender. Some people are biased by a person who comes from an environmental organization because they have a assumption about what those people are like. So I just saw a recommendation from Eric about doing a role play. I'm happy to. Also, Eric, if you or Lulu or anybody else wants to jump in, you know, I am here at your disposal, and I think I want to pull back a little bit and allow space for like maybe more questions instead of going on these long explanations. So that way we can know if we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, that was really helpful. I thought there was some pretty interesting things. And I love your suggestion just to really think about them as people and, you know, to engage the way you would be engaging with a person like your neighbor. You wouldn't like bug your neighbor until they were irritated. You know, you'd be cognizant that they're your neighbor. You have to live with them.
Let me take it one step further. Thinking about personality profiles is useful. A bunch of the legislators, I believe, are the ones who are most difficult to lobby, are typically have a strongman personality. They may not be Trumpists, but they may just be the people for whom right and wrong is being smart or stupid. And the lobby visit with them usually involves them. In my experience, you can tell these meetings because they fundamentally involve the person pointing out somebody or some process which is stupid. That decision is stupid. That's idiotic. Can't believe they did that. I have actually found that if I can just pick a random inconsequential example and broadly criticize it, I have I was trying to remember what it was. So I'm not a huge fan of destroying art in the name of building a climate movement. I love the activism for young people, but I personally don't care for that tactic. I also don't know any of them, won't meet them, and I don't think I'm personally insulting them. And once or twice I've been in a meeting with legislators and somehow ineffective activism has come up, and I said, yeah, like, what are we going to do? Like, we're going to destroy a bunch of art to save the planet. Just a little bit of that tone, that presumption creates a relationship with some of those people. There are other people I know who want to ground, they view policy through the lens of individual impacts in people. It's not numbers, it's not abstract, it's not 80 billion of this, it's not percentage of elevated asthma cases. It's, I want to tell you about Erica in your district who suffers from chronic respiratory disease, and she lives 1.5 miles from the Wheelabrator trash incinerator. And so, and there's just a couple of those examples, and none of this is, we don't get trained on this and to actually think about this. And I wish I had tools to help like evaluate it. So, but my general recommendation is you can quickly figure out if the person is a person who responds to rational arguments and data. Statistics show that's like 5% of us. Like, show me the fact sheet. I want to engage with you in the details. But for a lot of people, it's understanding how it's going to impact their district, providing a particular story, or providing a good guy and a bad guy. So those are like some of the tools, but all that starts with just trying to get to know them. And if you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes in a lobby visit, it can be so you feel like you have to say everything in 5 minutes. And what I tell them is like, we're in it for the long haul. Maybe we won't win this year, but you got to start off by asking a couple questions and like take a little bit of that time to get to know them, because your lobbying will be so much more effective if you actually know who you're lobbying.
That's so interesting. There's a whole school of communication that focuses on figuring out if somebody is oral or audio or visual or feelings. There's this is one school of communication. They divide people into these 3 categories, and they say that most people are dominant in one. And you can kind of pick it up if you ask somebody a neutral question like, I don't know, how was your morning? And they say, oh my God, I feel great. The coffee I had this morning was fantastic. that's a feelings person. They're like, but somebody else says like, we just got, we're renovating our house. We have this great view of the lake now. You're probably talking to a seeing person, and, things like that, the words that people use. And so then if somebody is a seeing person, you switch into that seeing language, you use words like look and, view, and, our view is this, or right. So there is a whole, I think, skill to, like you said, kind of really thinking about what type of person is this and trying to communicate in their language with their style of what's focusing on what's important to them. I think those are really effective suggestions. Appreciate that.
Eric, I want to put a pin in a future idea of diving into those profiles and analysis, because that's something that I don't know a lot about, and I would love to figure out where my sort of jerry-rigged systems based on experience, not based on sociology or people, like jives with what the academic research shows. But what you're saying, Lulu, really resonates with me, and being able to understand that and maybe even operationalize it in a somewhat easier way could be a great training tool for people. I also know some people can shift their communication styles quickly, and others can't. So the other thing you can figure out is not how a person can shift their communication style, but if there is somebody in your team who has certain communications styles that are best suited. Like I have a couple people who are like very bro-y, like they can talk baseball. I can't talk baseball. I went to the Orioles game last week with some folks, and I had to like study up to find like a single person on the team that I could reference and be excited about. So there may be some people who are predisposed to approach certain legislators just based on how we know those legislators operate and how they think.
I think Roy has a question.
Actually,
Yes,
it's a comment. Lulu, you had mentioned that there's feeling people and seeing people. I've come across money people, and those are legislators who want to know what this ask you have is going, how much money is going to produce for my area, and they look for creating jobs and what have you. So we got involved with some sort of a wastewater issue with them. My group did, and all they said, well, we want a solution to our wastewater problem that we can create jobs and make money for the unions and what have you. So I happened to be dealing with a lobbyist at that point, and that's what he said to me. He said, we have to show them how they can make money. And that's another category we ran into. So
that's a category for a lot of legislators that is layered on top of all of it. And sometimes you have to find the information if it exists and you can make that argument to them. But if you don't have that compelling argument, then I distinguish between the lobby strategies for advocacy groups, people who have a issue or a platform who meet with multiple lobbyists regardless of their district. And to me, that's a little bit different from what constituents should be doing. Constituents should be first and foremost reminding the legislator that as a constituent and a voter, they care. And the trick to being a good lobbyist as a constituent is to appear as much as possible to that legislator like the most average member of their voting bloc. As in, you want them to look at you and think, I bet you 300 or 500 people probably think this way. So in those cases, you can also flip things around and figure out if there's a financial cost or benefit to the individual. And this is only if you can't make that financial argument, but on stormwater runoff, for example, if you can find somebody whose house has been harmed or who have had an impact on their health from flooding, then the cost to the individual and the constituent can sometimes counter the fact that they have to spend money to solve something, because at the end of the day, it is their job to also represent and protect their constituents.
I think another question that I have is kind of like leads to, because so, for example, for our issue that we're advocating for, we're trying to get the counties to purchase voting machines that are more secure and also happen to be more affordable, massively more affordable, as it turns out, like
Okay, well, I'll just have some in.
2 to 3 times more affordable. And so it's tens of thousands of dollars that they are going to be wasting on these bad technologies. But what we're running into is that the lobbyist for the technology has more money than us and more influence than us. And so I'd say that's another just kind of like, I was talking about kind of buckets of questions. That's another bucket of questions that I have is, what do you do when you run into someone who has deeper pockets or deeper influence or deeper hooks in that particular legislator, especially a legislator who's in like a key, like blocking position, like they're the gatekeeper to your legislation, and they're in the pocket or under the influence of your opposition, basically. But that's, I'd say, the situation that we're in here.
So, so we're moving a little bit away from communication tools for persuasion in average situations to targeted legislative strategy. And we actually do that every single year in Maryland because we need to build a big, strong base of support and get a lot of people on board. But based on the way the committee system is organized in Maryland, we usually actually only have like 3 to 4 actual targets. And we encounter the system you're talking about where we need to get a person who is currently not with us at all. Eric, speak now or forever hold your peace, but I'm happy to dive into that, that topic area.
Please.
Yeah, we're super interested in this.
Yeah. The fundamentals don't change. You have to get the person to vote with you. And we say that you can, your modes of influence are money. Is there any way that you can either mess with their money or offer them money? Not money, like give them money, but like understanding where they get donations from. Do you have people who can give donations? What is your influence over their money? Re-election. So basically, is there any way to demonstrate to them that their position on the issue will influence their election? Some of these people are in hard districts. Half the time, they're completely uncontested. Legacy. This is an interesting one. Some of them don't care, but some of them really care about their perceived legacy and figuring out who defines that for them. Like, who are the people that they go to seek judgment? Former legislators, family, their minister, money, lobbyists, legacy, general coverage in media. And I have a 5th one that I can't quite remember, so I'll come back to it. So the first thing that we do is we look at their finances. We look at assuming that you're in a place where they'll show you the campaign donations and look who their biggest campaign donors are. And if you can, from that, try to find somebody that you know who can tell you a little bit more about that person. Because you want to figure out, are you trying to convince the person, or are you trying to compete with the lobbyists for whatever they're offering the person? And every elected official makes trade-offs, except Dennis Kucinich or whoever. Like, most of them occasionally vote strategically, not just morally. So we can judge it or not judge it, but like, it's a reasonable question. Are they voting because they believe this, or are they voting because this is just a hard vote to take and this person has a lot of influence and they give them money? The second thing we do is a power map, is we walk backwards with the person, looking at the money, looking at relationships, looking at the church, looking at everything we know about the bio, and we map every possible point of influence that we have to them. First and foremost through relationships. Like, do we know the person? If not, do we know somebody who knows them? If not, do we know somebody who knows somebody who knows them? And and what you have to do is you have to engage as many potential allies as you can if you have donors to your organization, I go to my donors and I ask them if they have those political connections. I will also ask other lobbyists, as long as they're not going to like rat me out or something like that. But even if they're not connected, and sometimes I'll ask other legislators. So if you have champions in the county who are with you, you can go to them for advice on the other person as well. So we'll map all of that out. One thing I do is I try to build and show as much power as possible to change the value proposition. So if I have 6 people who I know are going to vote with me, I try to get them out in public in some way. Maybe a joint letter, maybe a press conference, maybe even a blog post where they all comment on it. But we always assume that everybody knows everything, but information's imperfect. So, the first step to having this person make a rational decision is to make sure that they have all the information, at least that you want them to make, which is to say they should be presented with the strongest version of your case. And that includes making sure they visually or auditorily, once we know how they make decisions, understand who's on the other side of the issue. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have put on a press conference in front of the Capitol building or in a county, and the press conference, if it's well timed, is going on, and 1 or 2 legislators will just walk up and say, what's going on? Oh, it's this. Oh, I didn't get an invite. I'd love to say 2 words. So you might just pick up the swing people because they suddenly see that there's 6 or 7 folks on one side and they want to be on what they think is the winning side. And the truth is they haven't seen the other votes. They just know that there's 6 people acting collectively, and that can be powerful. We bombard folks with emails. Speaking of persistence, Sierra Club is unapologetically a nuisance lobbyer. So we have our own internal system. All of our members are organized by their legislative districts, and our tool allows us to send an email to everybody in a county, have them click, have them contact and send something to that elected official, and say, I would like to urge you to vote this way on this issue. That's usually the best way that we try to signal to them that this could be an election issue. The other potential way to signal to them that it could be an election issue is to figure out who the precinct captains or members of the Democratic Central Committee are. But also, some people after legislative session do these debriefs. For us, there's this massive retirement home with like 6,000 units. And they have so much political power because when they organize a post-legislation debrief, like at the end of the session, the legislators come and they explain everything and these people ask questions. So, these post-session debriefs begin to define the election issues. That's when somebody hears about something, becomes pissed about how the legislator did or did not vote. So, I basically try to orchestrate as many different ways to signal to them. I put on a bunch of events and I invite them, even if I know they don't support, just so that they get the invitation, or CC them, to make sure you're aware. So basically, I assume completely imperfect information and I try to present a version of the world in which I'm winning and I want them to join that winning side. But yeah, if it's money too, and you've got a large coalition, do you have campaign finance limitations in New York?
Yeah.
What's your donation maximum?
I have to look it up. It's 50,000. We were looking at some of the donors the other day.
I'm not above asking for it's a very delicate area of work. So let me say what I do. I will go to my donors in their district and I'll present the facts to them. And I'll say, we think we have a problem. They think they need these bad guys in order to win. I'd like to show them they don't. I don't like doing this for bad people. It just makes me feel icky. So I personally will only do this for people who I think are generally decent elected officials, and I want to get them to the right side of the issue, or if I think that they have a valid concern or something. You know, you're gonna draw the lines where you're gonna draw the lines. I'm also Sierra Club and I'm in the public eye, so if I did something too sketchy, it would blow back. But I have absolutely encouraged our volunteers to host fundraisers for people, make donations, and engage in that way if I think that that can help counterbalance the influence. And it seems like big money, but then when you think about our, you know, if I get somebody who gives me $5,000 a year and I say, give me 3,000 instead and donate 2,000 to this person, I think it will help the cause more. You know, that's sometimes you just fight money with money. In states with campaign finance reform, it's a little bit easier to do that. But in this case, I just have to say, everything you're saying makes me really curious. I would be the lobbyist for the voting machines is a established lobbyist who lobbies on other issues too. Yeah.
Yes, they're an extremely influential lobbyist. In this case, they hired a vice president. I think his title is director, VP of strategy, something like that. And he's not even technically a lobbyist, but he has deep ties with some very influential people. He's a former assembly member who was also a former member of the Black Caucus, who's also a former election law committee chair. He has deep relationships with the state chapter of the NAACP. So he got the state chapter of the NAACP to oppose our bill. It's like a really, really deeply connected individual.
These are like my favorite situations. So now you got to power map this person, right? But based on what you're describing, it could be a couple things. To me, the least likely option is that he has convinced this particular person to truly believe his argument. It's possible, but secondly, it's just scary. Those people with that much power are scary to, like, they don't even have to flex. You know what they say, that, you know, power is the perception of power, and those people come with the ability to move so much that they don't even have to move a lot. The legislator just thinks that that's what it comes with. So if you know other people who know them and just trying to figure out, like, what their approach is, because maybe he's moving money, maybe he is able to move a bunch of his people in to go and attend, like, you know, the next fundraiser. Maybe he's co-hosting a fundraiser, like it. But sorry, go ahead.
He's a chair of the Manhattan Democratic Party, also.
Oh my Lord!
And he works for a lobbyist. And I know a couple years ago when our bill came up, one of the things that happened that we thought was really obvious, but to us, but maybe not to everybody, was that the stakeholder that we're trying to influence, the one I said, who's like basically the gatekeeper, who's shutting our bill down. So she, at that juncture, was appointed the secretary of the Manhattan Democratic Party. And we thought that that appointment was quite possibly a sort of plum appointment. Not that there's anything, you know, that's special about it, but it puts her in the leadership.
Right.
And it seemed like it was a possible reward for, you know, following that particular policy. So it seems like some sort of moves like that have happened in the past.
I mean, this is like, so I'm sorry I'm smiling. It's just that to me, there's a part of this that just becomes like a puzzle. So based on your situation and what you're describing, sounds like this is a multi-year campaign. And if this was my members, and I'll give you the example again, going back to the bottle deposit bill, we have told our volunteer leadership that this is in the shortest a 3-year campaign, but that I told them I thought it was a 5-year campaign because I thought we wouldn't truly be able to shift the politics until we make it high profile enough that it then becomes an election issue the following cycle. So I don't want to mess with your perceived timeline, but based on what you're saying, you know, a couple things that I would think about are, one, seems like what you're describing seems like a fairly sketchy positioning for the party itself. And it would be interesting to think if you could do a issue resolution, which would, you know, establish that the Democratic Party has a position on these issues. You could bring a petition from the local Democratic committees, you know, not the one that's being targeted, but some other ones, and bring it forward and basically see if you can draw a wedge between this person's power and their own particular role. I would definitely look into the NAACP stuff. I don't want to extrapolate, but NAACP took a position in Maryland on a sketchy transportation project based on trusting a relationship they shouldn't have trusted. And we worked with them for a year, and they reversed their position on that particular project, in addition, looking at the national policy. So based on starting positions, you may be able to engage with and peel off the NAACP. I don't know how much you all work with them, but most of the state conferences have annual policy conventions, and you can either sometimes for free, sometimes for the admission of a ticket, go and present the issue at their conferences. So, I mean, I was just going to very quickly say, like, I think there'd be a way to, based on what you're saying, my strategy would be to work on how to invalidate the lobbyist itself, because it seems like they have a stronghold. And then we start to get into tactics that I should not be talking about on a live stream.
Hey,
Yeah.
Josh, how do you feel? We have a volunteer who is willing to pitch his potentially planet-saving technology. You pretend to be a senator, and then we give him some coaching about how he could do better. How does that sound, folks?
That sounds great. How realistic / annoying of a senator should I be?
You should be very realistic. We want Eli starts out being a super scientific person. His internet connection is not great, so we're going to leave him off video. But so he's going to come. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes from a very intellectual point of view. You have to coach him to be able to talk at the level that a senator could actually hear. Eli, you're on.
And just to say, I'm going to skip.
Hi.
I'm going to skip the other pitfall tactics of a legislator, which is that they will usually start and take up the entire time talking about themselves, which is a whole set of introductions. So yes, let's roll.
Okay.
Oh yeah, how would he interrupt the conversation politely to get to talk? Is there a trick there you want to share?
Yeah, so number one, talk first. Thank you so much for with us. We're looking forward to talking with you about, you know, this, and this. What we were thinking is that I would start first, and we want to make sure we're doing a round of introductions, and then we'd love to hear from you. So I sort of just grab the reins from the start.
Okay. So a little bit of background so that this will make sense.
We explain it to the senator.
No, I'm coming in with no background.
That's okay. Yeah. So we're all keenly aware of how extreme 2023 was and how extreme 2024 is on track to be in terms of climate extremes. Even the climate scientist Michael Mann, who defends the IPCC models, concedes that they're doing a horrible job predicting extreme weather events. We are set up to be blindsided by climate disruption. Other leading climate scientists like James Hansen and Stefan Rahmstorf are coming out and saying that the top line IPCC models are actually underestimating climate disruption significantly, and they are worried. And as many people are also aware, the IPCC has been getting better on talk, but has not been getting better on delivering, at least in terms of the major bottom line, like emissions are still growing. Beyond which, the whole discourse is kind of crippleware. They have targeted net zero when, for instance, what
Eli, start talking about OA rad at some point.
okay, real soon, I'm getting there. Net zero is kind of like a compromise target that will miss the real targets that we would want, which is a safe climate and a restored natural environment and ecology. We're already seeing how horribly disrupted ecology is where things are, and things will get significantly worse before we get to net zero. What we need to do is clean up the mess we've been making of the atmosphere for a couple of centuries by doing very efficient carbon dioxide removal at planetary scale. This can be done. We can approach it differently than the typical approaches of direct air capture and other things that you may have heard of. Specifically, what I propose to do is develop a technology which very efficiently cultivates biomass and can essentially scale itself by converting that biomass into more of the system. And this is all something that can be implemented with
Okay, let's
97.
pause here. Let's pause here. So Eli has a vision for a self-replicating phytoplankton farm, and he really didn't get to talk to Senator Josh here about it. So maybe you want to jump in and help Eli understand how he could get to the well, before you have to go to your next meeting, Senator.
Yeah. Sorry, I feel most comfortable just giving you a couple tips. I was deciding that I wasn't a senator that was interrupting you, but a senator that was ignoring you.
Okay.
So my first tip is you didn't introduce yourself. I don't know who you are, and you didn't say hi to me. Super important. Just make a connection to me. And then number two, unless you know this person knows what the IPCC is, James Hansen and Robert Mann, I would not mention any of them, and I definitely wouldn't say as most people know. Because first, I just don't think most people know, but you definitely don't know if this person knows. So what I would do is I would just flip it around and think about what made this person interested in it. So I will tell you, even I have trouble getting excited around global climate strategies because as much as I have influence in Maryland, I still feel like I don't have a lot of influence on global climate policy. It's so overwhelming. But there's a lot that New York legislature does have control over. So I might reference a recent storm and just say, in the last couple of years, the idea, the threat of climate change has become a reality. We're sitting here today. We are talking today with record heat waves, up and down the East Coast. More and more heat-related illness and death every year. We're seeing the impacts, and there's a lot that needs to be done. We know a lot of what needs to be done, but we also need to be innovative, and we need to be thinking about new creative ideas. And I want to present to you a really, really exciting idea that I think New York could help accelerate or get going. So I would think of some short lead-in, because to me, what I understood is that you wanted to convey to them that there is a gap in the IPCC strategy, that emissions are in fact not going down despite increasing knowledge of the threat of climate change, or something like that. But I would just say to the average legislator, just reminding them that climate change is bad and you have a solution is at least enough to create space to present the idea.
Okay.
I do have a question about whether or not I get people who pitch technology ideas to me, and they want me to bring them
Mhm.
to the legislature. And I would make sure that you know what it is you want to get from the legislature. Some
Mhm.
states have innovation grants. I don't know if you want funding or if you want a political partner. But this is just like purely coaching. Like I would,
Mhm.
if you're going to be pitching something like this to a legislator, I would pitch it to a legislator who knows climate. Um,
Yeah.
um, but I really liked Clean Up the Mess. To me, that's like a really fun, accessible one. It also speaks to moral imperatives. People are always supposed to clean up their mess. Clean after your mess. We were told since we were kids to clean up the mess. If you make a mess, it's your job to clean it up. So I just say, in terms of language, I really like that phrase because I think it intrinsically includes a sense of responsibility. So just
Mhm.
want to green light that one. That's like that was that.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. I will definitely be re-reviewing everything you just said.
Yeah, like the tricks for getting to the point quickly. I mean, he needs funding for something that could be planet saving.
Mhm.
And yes, the backup, the problems with what the IPCC, are all good justifications. It's very tempting for a super intellectual Renaissance scientist like Eli to want to give you the whole background.
Right. Since we're talking on this specifically, I would also say consider the logical questions that this person will have about why you are coming to an elected official for funding for a science project, experiment, R&D. Because they might first think, don't we have like programs? Aren't we giving money to, federally or at a state level where this money is supposed to go out to people doing this work? So where was the breakdown in the system that you are not able to secure money from that venue that you're coming to me? There may be a totally straightforward answer there, but just to say, I mean, the way a legislator would have to do this is that they would have to, I mean, they can't write a bill to give you money unless you have a nonprofit, in which case they might be able to do like a bond bill. But I would also, I guess my point is, I would double check to make sure that this person can actually give you what you want. One of the fundamental trainings in the Organizing for Social Change manual is to pick a target that can give you what you want. So I would just make sure that this person can give you what you want, even if that's advice. Several states have increased their R&D fund, and New York is, as far as I know, one of them related to their climate initiative. So I would also consider reaching out to I guess it's like NYSERDA and then the energy office and seeing if they have any innovation grants underway, because they've got a goal of something close to net zero in the state as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You have 5 more minutes. Josh, are you?
Yeah, no, the other thing we got canceled, so I can keep going.
Bridget, is there a question that you would like to ask?
Honestly, I didn't have one. I just was feeling a lot of appreciation, though, for all the kinds of things that Josh has been saying, because I think I'm not personally focused on politics, but so much of what you're saying seems very wise that I could apply it in other situations, influencing people that I want to get to back our nonprofit or a movie that I'm trying to get funding for. So I just want to say thank you
So
so
let
much.
me ask you a question for you.
Okay.
She's going to be dealing with children. Children, like other people, don't know that organizers exist, don't know that this skill set is important. What would you like to share with a person who's going to be dealing with young people who care about the environment, so
What
that they
age group?
Like 8 to 18, like basically kids that can read and write a little bit up through high school, maybe college.
Get them in front of a mic for fundraising purposes. every few years, we support a school or a nonprofit to bring a group of people, a group of young people, high school students usually, to Annapolis to testify.
Mm.
And it is the main event of the day.
Aw.
They are compelling, they're passionate, and they intrinsically embody the notion of intergenerational equity, right? Because we're not theorizing about future generations. You're literally looking at the person who might have to inherit it. So, but get that on camera, get a film like that, them being able to say that they went and spoke to the Capitol or spoke to the county council or something like that. I just heard a group of people come and make a pitch for more adaptive technology in the school system, and like, damn, they're just so good. So just to me though, other than a press conference or something like that, it's a way to get them dressed up in the moment, like making that pitch. But young people are incredibly powerful lobbyists, especially to anybody who thinks on that sort of personal, emotional, intergenerational level. If nothing else, they might say, well, I don't know where I'm at on the issue, but now I understand what's driving this. So it might unlock the next part of the conversation.
I love that because I'm a theater teacher also. So we're all about voice and presence. So it's like a perfect match. Thank you.
Great. It is great training. And I'll just say that I don't know any details beyond what was just shared with me, but I know lots of projects to try to empower young people that lead them to incredibly challenging and often unrealistic pursuits, and fundraising and supporting existing causes. Like, young people should start nonprofits and do their own thing too, but finding a cause that you support, especially a climate cause, is incredibly helpful, and they're great fundraisers and donors and campaigners. And so love to touch base more and learn more about what you're working with. I see a hand up. I also just wanted to share two other quick tricks of the trade in terms of terms. This is when you find somebody you need to lobby at a party. Nobody likes getting lobbied at a party. Try not to lobby people at a party. And if you do, ask consent. I'd like to pitch you on something. They can say no. But my personal favorite also is, I need to get some advice. When you have a difficult legislator, don't go at them straight, go at them from the side. Say, I'm really struggling with this issue. I'm trying to figure out what type of message will really persuade people. And like, if this is the first time you've gone at it, like, they don't even realize you're actually talking about them. But if you can engage them and ask them for advice, but what I try to do in the social spaces is I'll say to somebody like, I got something to pitch you on, and I think you're going to have a lot of questions and concerns. It's going to be a fun conversation, might be a little bit punchy, but I'd like to set up a little bit of time to see if we can, go tete-a-tete on this challenging issue. And that way, sometimes I'm just like setting it up and maybe making it fun. Like, hey, I want to talk to you about this challenging issue. So I found that any way you can sort of introduce the topic and lighten it up will help set somebody up if you're going to come in there and talk to them about an issue where they might be starting on the opposite side. But we had a hand up for a question. I'm happy to take that if that's still.
We have a question.
Yes, it's a quick question. What can you tell us or give advice on regarding petitions, if they are effective?
It's not universal. Some legislators don't take them seriously, some do. I find them to be very effective. If I don't know that they're ineffective, I do them, and I do them for a couple reasons. First, petitions help you gather your people. They help you figure out who's with you. They get the names on a list. They give you a sense of power. And from a campaign perspective, the most important thing to me about a petition is that if you do it early in the campaign, it gives you the group that you can go back to ask for more. So Lulu, the folks on a petition might be a group that you might email asking, hey, does anybody know this senator or this influencer? We view two forms of petitions. One is when you gather up all the names and then you deliver them at a key moment. So the delivery of a petition can also be a big media moment for a press conference or just for a really good photo op for social media. If we're going to do that, we print them out. I'm sorry to be wasting the paper, but we'll print them out in like large font. So we have like a big stack of papers, you know, like, oh, dumping it on the desk. Or you can set up a petition where an email goes directly to the legislator and sort of they have a steady flow of information. So we use petitions and emails a lot. It's not as good one-to-one as personalized emails and personalized phone calls. But if you have a broad enough campaign, almost every single one of our core campaigns has an associated petition. It's what we do when we launch, because it also forces you to articulate what you want in 3 to 4 sentences. So I am a big fan of campaigns. Are there some legislators who do not care? Yes. In which case that happens, and then you have a large list of people who feel frustrated by that legislator's lack of caring, and you can strategize from there. So even if they don't care at all, it's still a power building tool.
Wonderful. I encourage everyone to subscribe to this YouTube channel, which is Life, Light, and Curious, and to join the meetup, which if you Google Life, Light, and Curious meetup, you should find that. So you will know about future meetings, including, I hope, a return visit from my newest friend, Josh. Thank you so much.
And if you are interested, you can donate to the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. That is a horrible translation of the link, but it's going to work. You can donate to the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club, or you can donate to the Atlantic chapter, which is the name of the chapter in New York State. Eric can share my contact information afterwards, and happy to circle back on one of these meetups and talk again. It was fun. I really appreciate it.
I was
so
super
much.
moved by your advice around how to engage the children. I thought that was really powerful, and I'd love to hear more brainstorming with Lulu about how to counter that that very effective lobbying campaign from election system vendors.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do everything in my control to do my own work this afternoon and not try to find that person and start power mapping them. You know, that's it's one of my favorite pastimes.
Oh, maybe we'll connect with you on that. I sent you a LinkedIn invite, so let's connect and maybe you can help us. We'd be totally down with your to making that a fun thing for you to do.
All right, sounds good. Well, I hope everyone has a lovely weekend. Stay cool.
Thanks so
Good
much.
time to copy anything you want out of the chat, because I'm closing the meeting in about 15 seconds.
Eric, you'll send me the list of the participants.
Interesting. Oh, yes. I'm not sure I have everyone's. I have some of their emails, but anyone, could you can you chat me contact information here to the host ID so that I can give it to Josh.
And I'm fine I'm not actually asking that the ability to contact everyone. I was just hoping to get like the names in the organization so I have a sense of who I was like on the Zoom with.
Oh yeah, anything like that people are willing to send, that would be great. Please send it. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, everybody.